The systems development lifecycle is a framework that defines the steps involved in the development of software, and it consists of a number of phases. Okay, normally when you develop a software or a system, this SDLC is the framework that you would refer to. Okay, not only that it has phases, but it also has the input and output for each phases. It tells us who are involved in each phases. That is why it is called a framework. Okay, the traditional SDLC is the waterfall model, because if you look at the diagram of SDLC, the traditional one, it looks like a waterfall. One phase has to be executed after one another. Yeah, but as time goes on, there are various approaches in SDLC where some changes has been made. So these are the non-traditional SDLCs, such as prototyping, rapid application development, agile, scrums. There are many. Okay, but fundamentally it all begins with the traditional SDLC. These are the phases of SDLC for this particular lesson. If you Google SDLC, right, there are variations. Some steps, there are some SDLC. There are 7 steps. Some are 5 steps, and also some are 4 steps. But fundamentally, they are the same. It's just that probably the name are different, but fundamentally they are similar. For this SDLC, for this traditional SDLC, it has 5 phases: planning, analysis, design, implementation, and maintenance. As you can see here, it looks like a waterfall, right? One phase followed by another phase, and so on. But by looking at this, you might be wondering that it's like a one-way street, because if something happens in the middle of this life cycle, then there is no way up, but there must be an option to move or to go to the previous step. That is why you would have all this number of approaches, like I mentioned earlier, like prototyping, RAD, rapid application development, and others, just to tell the developers that actually you can make your way up to the previous phases if something bad happens. Bad here means that the development or the output that you have for each of the phases does not meet the user requirements. So it is important that whatever that you do in SDLC, whatever phases that you are in the SDLC, you have to make sure that it follows the requirements from the users. Okay, this particular SDLC, I got it from, well, Google as well. There are many references on the internet that you can get on SDLC, so I've provided 2 here, so you can refer to these 2 websites. Okay, I'm going to go through briefly on the phases in the SDLC. Firstly, I think that you might want to copy the diagram before I move on to the phases of the SDLC. So we'll begin with the first phase, which is planning. So in planning, what you would do is you would define the problem and scope of the existing system. Okay, overview of the new system and determine its objective, looking into project feasibility, whether it can be done or not, looking into schedule, how long that this project is going to take. You identify any threats, any constraints, security, any integration problem that you might encounter throughout the project. And at the end of this phase, after you have done all that, you would produce a report. This report is called a feasibility report for the entire project. So this report will contain everything that you have done for this phase. For example, looking into feasibility, schedule, looking at the problem, looking at the new existing system and how the new system will address the problems from the existing system. Okay, so those are all planning, and not to forget the manpower or the people involved in the information system development project as well. So you need to include the manpower also into this feasibility report, because that is part of the planning. Okay, so once you have identified all that from the previous phase, which is the schedule, the manpower, the scope, so now it's getting it to work, right? In the analysis phase is where you would gather, analyze, and validate information from the user. This is the phase where you would define the requirements for the new system, and also to have to define how the new the system is going to look like. Okay, because you have so many requirements, right, that you get from the user. Sometimes you cannot satisfy all, you cannot address all requirements, so you need to prioritize. Yeah, so you need to evaluate the alternatives and prioritize the requirements, which one that is really important to the organization that needs to be addressed first. And also is to examine the information needs of end users and enhances the system goal. And the output for the analysis phase is a document called Software Requirement Specification, or SRS. So this SRS document specifies the software, the hardware, functional, and the network requirements of the system. In the analysis phase, what the system analyst would do is to produce all the necessary analysis models, such as use cases, data flow diagram, entity relationship diagram, and all those diagrams that is required for the system analyst to do in the analysis phase. Okay, so all this are gathered from the users. So you have to remember that. Again, the system analyst is the middleman between the users and also the technical people. The next phase is the design. So here in design, it includes the design of the application, network, databases, user interface, and system interfaces. So in the design phase, right, it moves towards technicality. So everything becomes a bit technical, because the programmers would refer to all the documents created in the design phase for the development. From the SRS document, this document will be transformed into a more logical structure, which contains detailed and complete set of specifications that can be implemented in a programming language. So this signifies, or this indicates, technicality. So there is no more business-like models or business-like terms. Now it is more technical terms that moving towards programming. So in the design phase also, you would create a contingency, training, maintenance, and operation plan. In the design phase also, you would review the proposed design, ensure that the final design must meet the requirements stated in the SRS document, most importantly, because now from the SRS document, it is shifting towards the design. Yeah. Finally, prepare a design document which will be used during the next phases. So the output for the design phase is the design documents that contains the design, the system architecture, that contains design of the user interfaces, on how it's going to look like, where the buttons are, where the labels and all that, and also the database design. Okay, so that is also important. You might have an ERD diagram previously, but now the ERD diagrams is quite technical. It includes information such as data attributes, the data length, the data type, even the name of the attributes are technical names. Yeah, because this database design, database design will be given to the database programmers for development. Hence, the next phase is implementation, right? So that based on the design documents, right, the information, the development will take place. Now the programmers can do their work based on the design documents that has been prepared by the system analyst. In implementation, you would implement the design into source code, the programming language. Through coding, you would combine all the modules together into training environment that detects error and defects based on the system architecture which you have created previously. You would have modules. Now, for example, like you would have a login module, you would have a finance module, you would have sales ordering module, whatever modules that is required based on the user requirements. So now these modules are probably being developed independently, but in the implementation phase you need to integrate them all together into an environment that can be tested by the users to ensure that there is no errors and also defects. In this implementation phase, you will need to conduct, the development team needs to conduct two types of testing. Of course, there are other testing in software development, but for here I'm just talking about two types of tests, which is usability testing and also user acceptance testing. The similarities between the two is that both are testing methods. The difference is that the way that the testing is being conducted. For usability testing, is more on how easy the system is to be used by the user, how easy it is for the user to use the system. So the tests take place with real users to measure how usable or intuitive a system is and how easy for the users to reach their goals. So if the user wants to go to a specific page in the system or specific screen in the system, the system must be easy enough for the user to navigate to that screen. Okay, so usability talks about how usable that system is. User acceptance testing is to ensure that all the requirements that has been stated by the user is working and the user is accepting that. Okay, so for user acceptance testing, or UAT, is about testing the software or the system by the user or client to determine whether it can be accepted or not. So if the system allows for a certain report to be produced, then the system must produce that report. Okay, so the final testing is performed once the functional system and regression testing are completed. So it here means that you would do a user acceptance test after the programmers and the system analyst has verified that the system is working. Basically, it's a fully functional system, but it is not being put into the actual live production yet. Okay, it is still, but all the modules are working. It's just a matter of whether the user will accept that that system or not. Of course, the user will refer to the requirement that has been stated earlier. So this user acceptance testing will be conducted before the system goes live, before the system is actually being implemented or being used in the organization. Okay, so for implementation, is about integrating the information system into its environment and install the new system. Okay, so that's the end of the implementation phase, where the system goes into live production. The users in their organization actually use it for their day-to-day operations or for whatever objectives. Okay. Okay, I would like to recap on the topic system development lifecycle. Firstly, we talk about the need of developing information systems. I talk about there are two groups or two categories in which organization need to develop information system. The first group or the first category is more organizational or related. Yeah, for example, that the existing system in the organization is it's an old system that is in the brink of breaking up. It makes operations of the organizations more ineffective rather than effective. So because of that reason, there is a need for the organization to develop information systems. There are also reasons that is more external, for example, that increasing competition by the competitors, new laws and regulations from the government that requires organizations to update or develop new information systems. I'll also talk about the approaches in acquiring information systems. Information systems can be acquired in three ways. So the first way or the first approach is by buying those systems off the shelf, buying it from a vendor. The thing is, if organizations buy systems off the shelf, this system comes in standard configuration. In order to fit into the organization, the IT department of the organization needs to do some configurations to that system. Or if the organization wants total control on the system, the organization can opt for building the information system in-house. Okay. However, this option would require the organization to have capable resources, the manpower, the people to develop the systems, and the people to maintain the systems. But the good thing about develop it in-house, because of you have total control, so you have flexibility in maintaining those systems, in updating those systems, because you do not have to rely on outside people to do the job. The third approach will be outsourced. This is about having that IT function to be handled by the third party. This is synonym with cloud computing, because of nowadays systems are being delivered to the users through cloud. Okay, when organization opt for this approach, it means that there is no physical hardware, there's no software that the organization would have it in-house or placed in the organization. Everything will be at the outsourced company's site. Yeah, and also the organization don't have to worry about updating, maintaining, and all those, because everything is being handled by the third-party company or the outsourced company. Thirdly, I talk about the stakeholders, the people involved in the IS development project. Firstly, you need to have the organization needs to have a development team which consists of the technical people, the system analysts, the users. So these are the development team. Yeah? Each parties have its own role, but among all these stakeholders, right, one role which is synonym to information system, which is system analyst. So this system analyst is in between the users and the developers or the technical team, because the technical team and the users, they talk differently. Okay, the users talk more of a business like, and the technical team more of the technical type of language. Yeah? So they do not communicate really well. So you need to have someone in the middle to facilitate that communication. Hence, the system analyst. So the system analyst, what the system analyst will do is to gather requirements from the users and translate those requirements into something which is understandable to the technical team, to the developers, programmers, and so on. So the job that the system analyst would do is, after getting the requirements from the users, the system analyst need to produce some models, whether it's analysis models or technical models. Okay, so these models will be given to the technical team for them to do their work. Yeah, for example, like database models, the data models that you have produced so far in other classes. So those data models will be used by the database developers to develop database for that information system. Okay, and lastly, I talk about system development life cycle. There are many variation of system life cycle, because if you Google SDLC, you'll see that okay, this SDLC has 4 steps, some have 7 steps. The one that I introduced in this particular lesson is 5 steps. But even though there are many variations, the fundamental is the same. Firstly, you need to start with planning. Okay. Secondly, you need to do the analysis. Okay. After getting the requirements from the users, getting requirements is not part of the planning. Okay. So planning is more about looking into problems, looking into budget, schedule, manpower, the actual work in IS for a system analyst is the analysis phase. Yeah, but no doubt system analyst works throughout the entire phases in the SDLC. In the design phase, now it becomes more technical bit from the models that has been produced in the analysis phase. It has moved, it has changed into something which is more technical, because these technical models will be given to the programmers to develop the database or programs or software. So in the design phase is where you would produce technical models, technical documents, and the implementation phase, which is after the design phase, is where you do the programmers would develop whatever that is based on the technical documents. Yeah, so all the development will be done in the implementation phase. Once the development has been done, the system needs to be tested. There are 2 types of tests, which is usability tests and also user acceptance tests. Usability test is more on how easy that system is to be used by the users. Okay, you don't want a system that is too cluttered with labels, with buttons. You do not want bright colors to be used, and so on. So that concerns with usability, whether it is easy to use or not, the system. Another type of testing is user acceptance test. This user acceptance test is a testing that is to ensure that all of the requirements stated by the users is being adhered to. Okay, so for example, if the system is able to produce this type of report, the user must get that report. The system must be able to produce that report. So if the system is able to produce that report, then the user will accept that. Okay, of course, when you do all these testing, there are a number of test cases that the system analyst has to produce or have to develop to the user for them to play around with the system, and if the system produce or do whatever that is intended to do, the system will be accepted. So the user acceptance testing will be the final testing before the system go live. Okay, but before that, you have to ensure that every functions, every module is working before you can proceed with the user acceptance test. Okay, there are 2 more. There one more topic, which is on subtopic, which is on the on SDLC, because the SDLC that I show, the planning, analysis, design, implementation, and maintenance. These are what we call the traditional SDLC, the waterfall model. In theory, each phases will need to be executed before executing the other phases. So it works like a waterfall, right, from top to down in theory. But in practical sense, there's nothing like that, because of every time that you have a problem, you will go back to the previous phase. Yeah, and because of user requirements is important, the variation of SDLC, the mutation of SDLC put user into the main picture. For example, like prototyping and also rapid application development, always put the user in the center, because so that if you put the user in the center, then you would minimize all these issues that requirements has not been addressed and so on. Okay, for prototyping and application development, I do not have videos for that, but I think that it is self-explanatory. You can go to Google and search for these two topics. For the rapid application development, I have videos which is in this slide, so please watch this video. But for these two topics, I just want you to know briefly on what these two non-traditional SDLC is. Okay, there will be a quiz, but I will update on you later on that. So that's the end. This is the last lecture or the last lesson for Fundamental of Information Systems. If you have any questions, you please let me know. Okay, so that's all. Thank you very much.